Hello. This week we are going to continue with the topic that was introduced last week. If you remember, I started last week by talking about how we started this course by learning how, if we collect data from experiments, we can calculate statistics, such as the mean, the number of times we'd observed a particular result. In addition, we learned about how we can sort the data and plot a cumulative probability distribution. After introducing these ideas, we had then moved on to probability theory and the study of data generated from the idealized distributions that are shown here. As we have discussed extensively, the probability mass functions for these various kinds of random variables are all functions of one or two parameters. Last week, we began making connections between these two domains of knowledge by showing how we can extract the parameters of the probability mass functions for these distributions by repeatedly sampling the random variable and calculating statistics. The particular method that we introduced for doing this was the method of moments. This method is based on the fact that the expectation of the sample mean is equal to the expectation for a single random variable, as shown in the equation here. The expectation, or more accurately the kth moment, for a discrete random variable can be determined from the probability mass function by using the expression shown at the top of this slide. We thus saw how we can use this expression to write equations for the moments of the variable in terms of the parameters. In other words, we express the kth moment for each type of random variable as a function of the parameters of the random variable. For example, we showed how for a Bernoulli random variable, the expectation is equal to the parameter p of the distribution. This thus gave us a method for estimating the parameters of the distribution. We estimate the moments of the distribution by repeatedly sampling the distribution and calculating a mean. We then equate the estimates for the moments that we get out by sampling with the functions of the parameters of the distribution that we obtain using the expression at the top of the slide. We then rearrange in order to get our estimate for the parameter. For the Bernoulli distribution, we can thus use the method of moments to equate p with the sample mean. We noted last week that if sample means are computed from a small number of samples, the precision is low. If by contrast we use a larger number of samples when computing the sample mean, we get a more precise estimate. One thing we will investigate this week is why this is the case. Before we get to that, however, we will consider something that may have struck you as you're working through the programming exercises last week. In particular, you may have noticed that some of the parameters that we obtained when we applied the method of moments were, for want of better word, crap. In other words, the estimates of the parameters that we got from the method of moments were nowhere near the true values of the parameters that we introduced. Furthermore, it didn't even look as if the distribution of estimates that we were obtaining was centered on the true value of the distribution. In other words, it looked as if our estimates were not simply imprecise, but they were inaccurate. What we will see this week is that these estimators are bad because of a consequence of the fact that for all but linear functions, a function g of the expectation is not equal to the expectation of a function of the random variables as shown here. This fact ensures that in many cases the method of moments produces inaccurate estimators for the parameters of distributions. So, to summarize, we are going to look at expectations of functions in more details and the consequence of the inequality at the top of this slide. We will then consider how to analyze distributions of samples in more detail. Last week, we learned how to find the positions of the centers of these distributions by calculating the sample mean. This week, by contrast, we will learn how we can estimate how spread out the data points are around this central point. In other words, we will learn how we can quantify how precise the estimator for our quantity is. I hope that is reasonably clear. Thanks for your attention and good luck with the exercises.